The grand halls of the Justice Chamber echoed with whispers as Lyra stood before the Supreme Council, her head held high despite the gravity of her situation. The crystalline walls of the chamber reflected the pale blue light of Lumeria's 3 moons, casting strange shadows across the faces of the 12 council members who sat in judgment. Next to her, separated by 2 guard posts, stood Mira, her childhood friend and fellow accused. They had known this day would come. The signs had been there. The warnings, the threats, the increasingly hostile surveillance. But neither of them had expected the entire council to assemble for their trial. That alone spoke volumes about how seriously the elite viewed their crimes. "You stand accused of spreading dangerous ideas among the lower classes," announced Head Counselor Vale, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of tradition. "You have been found guilty of encouraging unauthorized gatherings, promoting harmful concepts of equality, and worst of all, questioning the natural order of our society." Lyra fought the urge to speak out. She caught Mira's eye across the chamber, seeing the same barely contained defiance in her friend's expression. They had done nothing wrong. Their only crime had been teaching children from the worker class to read, to think, to question. But in Lumerian society, that was enough to mark them as dangerous revolutionaries. "Your actions show a disturbing lack of understanding about our ways," continued Vale, his silver robes shimming as he stood. "Despite extensive re-education attempts, you persist in your misguided beliefs. The council has therefore reached an unanimous decision." The chamber grew quieter still. Even the guards seemed to hold their breath. Lyra could hear her heart pounding in her ears, its rhythm matching the subtle pulse of the power crystals embedded in the chamber's walls. "You will be stripped of your noble status and exiled," Vale declared. "Your destination will be Earth, a primitive world in the outer sectors. There, you may witness firsthand the chaos that results from the lack of proper social order." A murmur ran through the assembled crowd. Exile was rare enough. But exile to Earth, that was practically unheard of. The planet was considered so backward that most Lumerians didn't even acknowledge its existence in polite conversation. "Your neural implants will be deactivated, leaving you with only basic universal translators and minimal survival gear," Vale continued. "You will be separated upon arrival to prevent further coordination of your destructive activities." Lyra wanted to laugh at the irony. The council thought they were delivering a harsh punishment, but all she felt was a strange sense of relief. Away from the suffocating hierarchy of Lumeria, perhaps they would finally be free to live as they chose. The next few hours passed in a blur of procedures and preparations. Their noble marks were ceremonially removed. The luminescent lines that had decorated their faces since birth faded away under the touch of the removal wand. Their formal robes were replaced with simple gray travel suits, and their personal devices were confiscated. As they were led to separate transport pods, Lyra managed to catch one last glimpse of Mira. Her friend's face showed the same mix of fear and excitement that Lyra felt in her own heart. They had no idea what awaited them on Earth, but it had to be better than living under the oppressive weight of Lumerian tradition. "Remember the Sunset Garden?" Mira mouthed silently, referencing their secret meeting place where they had first dreamed of a different kind of society. Lyra nodded slightly, holding onto that memory as the transport pod sealed around her. The launch was smooth and silent, as all Lumerian technology tended to be. Through the pod's transparent walls, Lyra watched her homeworld shrink away, its crystalline cities growing smaller until they were just points of light on the planet's surface. She thought she should feel sad, but instead, she felt strangely light, as if the artificial gravity in her pod wasn't working properly. As her pod entered faster than light travel, Lyra closed her eyes and smiled. The council thought they were punishing her and Mira, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were actually setting them free. Whatever Earth was really like, it had to be more interesting than the rigid, emotionless perfection of Lumeria. At least on Earth, they would have the chance to discover who they really were, away from the expectations and restrictions of their society. Little did she know that this punishment would lead her to discover something that Lumerian society had engineered out of existence centuries ago: the capacity to love. The transport pod broke through Earth's atmosphere with a gentle shimmer, its advanced technology ensuring a smooth descent despite the planet's thick air. Lyra watched through the transparent walls as towers of glass and steel rose up to meet her. This couldn't be right. Earth was supposed to be primitive, yet these structures reached toward the sky like the crystal spires of home. Her pod landed softly in an empty alley between two tall buildings, automatically engaging its cloaking system for the last time. As the door slid open, Lyra's senses were overwhelmed. The air was thick with countless smells, some pleasant, others strange and sharp. The sounds were even more overwhelming: mechanical roars, human voices, music drifting from somewhere nearby, and a constant background hum of activity. She stepped out onto the concrete, her simple gray travel suit immediately drawing curious glances from passing humans. Their clothes were so varied, so colorful, so individual. On Lumeria, clothing instantly showed your class and role. Here, it seemed to show personality instead. A small device in her ear, her only remaining piece of advanced technology, translated the human speech perfectly. "Nice cosplay," someone said as they walked past. Lyra didn't understand the word, but the friendly tone made her relax slightly. Perhaps she could pass off her otherworldly appearance as something humans found normal. Across the city, Mira's pod had landed in a quieter area filled with smaller buildings and trees. Her landing spot was a small park, and she quickly ducked behind some bushes as a group of young humans walked by, laughing and talking among themselves. Their casual display of emotion was shocking. On Lumeria, such public expression would be considered highly improper. Mira watched the humans carefully, trying to understand their behavior. A small gathering caught her attention. Humans sitting on blankets on the grass, sharing food and drinks. They seemed to have no regard for social hierarchy. A younger human was freely disagreeing with an older one, and instead of punishment, this sparked what appeared to be an enthusiastic discussion. Both Lyra and Mira spent their first Earth hours observing, learning, and trying to blend in. Lyra found herself drawn to a busy place humans called a shopping mall, where she could observe their social interactions. She noticed how they touched each other casually: handshakes, hugs, friendly pats on the shoulder. Such physical contact was strictly regulated on Lumeria, limited to formal greetings between equals. Mira, meanwhile, discovered a place called a public library. She slipped inside, amazed to find that anyone could access the information stored there. On Lumeria, knowledge was carefully controlled, distributed based on class and function. Here, children sat next to scholars, each reading whatever they chose. As night fell, both women faced their first challenge: finding shelter. Their pods had dissolved into harmless light particles, leaving them truly alone on this alien world. Lyra remembered seeing signs for something called a hostel, while Mira had noticed a guest house near the library. Using the small amount of local currency provided in their survival kits, they separately found basic accommodation. In their respective rooms, both women lay awake, processing the day's experiences. Lyra couldn't stop thinking about the casual happiness she'd seen: humans smiling for no apparent reason, laughing openly, even crying without shame. Mira was equally fascinated by the free exchange of ideas she'd witnessed, the way humans seemed to thrive on debate and discussion. Neither of them felt the punishment their exile was meant to be. Instead, each felt a growing excitement about this world where emotion wasn't a weakness and questioning things wasn't a crime. Their only regret was being separated from each other, the one person who would understand exactly what they were experiencing. As they drifted off to sleep in different parts of the city, neither knew that Earth's greatest surprise still awaited them. In their world of logical arrangements and emotional suppression, they had never experienced or even heard of the force that would soon change their lives forever. But here on Earth, among these wonderfully chaotic humans, They would discover something their advanced civilization had long ago forgotten: the power and beauty of love. The next day would bring new challenges and discoveries, but for now, they rested, their dreams filled with the colors, sounds, and emotions of their new home. A week passed, and both Lyra and Mira began to find their places in the strange, wonderful chaos of Earth. Lyra discovered the perfect way to observe human social behavior, working at a busy coffee shop in downtown Seattle. The owner, a kind-faced woman named Rose, didn't ask too many questions when Lyra said she was new to the area. She just showed Lyra how to work the coffee machines and handle the morning rush. Lyra found herself fascinated by the entire process. On Lumeria, food and drink were purely for sustenance, carefully measured and bland. But humans turned drinking coffee into an art form, a social ritual, even a comfort. They had endless variations: hot, cold, sweet, bitter, with different flavors and toppings. Each customer ordered their drink exactly how they liked it, another small act of individuality that would be unthinkable on their home world. "You're a natural at this," Rose said one morning, watching Lyra carefully craft a drink called a caramel macchiato. Lyra smiled, still getting used to showing emotion so freely. She especially enjoyed drawing little patterns in the foam, the kind of purely decorative act that would have been considered wasteful at home. Meanwhile, across the city, Mira had found her own way to integrate into human society. Her advanced knowledge of mathematics made her valuable as a tutor at a community center. She worked with students of all ages, from young children struggling with basic arithmetic to college students tackling complex equations. What amazed her most was how the humans approached learning. On Lumeria, education was rigid and practical. You learned exactly what you needed for your predetermined role, nothing more. But here, her students asked questions simply because they were curious. They wanted to understand the why behind the formulas, not just memorize them. One day, a teenage student named Jack stayed after his session, looking troubled. "I don't think I'll ever be good at math," he said, staring at his homework. On Lumeria, such admission of weakness would have meant immediate reassignment to a lower class. But Mira had learned new ways here. "What makes you think that?" she asked, sitting down beside him. They spent the next hour talking not just about mathematics, but about his fears and dreams. Mira found herself sharing things too, carefully edited versions of her own struggles with a rigid system that didn't allow for difference or doubt. As the days passed, both women found themselves changing in small but significant ways. Lyra started wearing colorful clothes like her coworkers, discovering she loved the way different colors made her feel. She learned to laugh at jokes, even if she didn't always understand them. The customers' daily stories became tiny windows into the rich emotional life of humans. Mira began to appreciate the beautiful messiness of human learning. She watched her students make mistakes, struggle, and finally understand, their faces lighting up with joy at each small victory. She learned that teaching wasn't just about transferring knowledge, but about building confidence and encouraging curiosity. Their survival gear included devices that created the illusion of Earth currency in their accounts, enough to live simply but comfortably. Yet both found themselves wanting to work anyway, drawn to the satisfaction of earning their own way and contributing to their new communities. What surprised them most was how quickly humans accepted them. Yes, people sometimes commented on their slight oddness, the way they occasionally used formal language, or their initial confusion about simple things like weather small talk or pop culture references. But humans seemed to embrace uniqueness rather than fear it. Neither Lyra nor Mira felt the isolation their punishment had intended. Instead, they were building connections, learning to feel and express emotions, discovering new ways of thinking and being. Their only lingering sadness was not being able to share these experiences with each other. In quiet moments, Lyra would think about Mira while making intricate patterns in coffee foam. Mira would remember Lyra while explaining to her students how mathematics could describe the patterns in nature. Neither knew that the universe, in its strange and wonderful way, was preparing to bring them back together in the most unexpected way possible. Rain fell steadily over Seattle, turning the city streets into rivers of reflected lights. Lyra watched the drops slide down the coffee shop's windows, still amazed by how humans found beauty in such common weather patterns. The shop was closing soon, and she had plans to visit the bookstore across the street. She had discovered reading for pleasure, another concept that would have been alien on Lemuria, and found herself drawn to something humans called poetry. That same evening, Mira was already in the bookstore, seeking shelter from the rain after her last tutoring session. She had started reading human stories about space and distant worlds, fascinated by how they imagined alien life. Some of their guesses came surprisingly close to reality, while others made her hide her smile behind the pages. The bookstore was warm and quiet, with soft yellow lights creating cozy corners between tall shelves. The smell of paper and coffee from the store's small cafe filled the air. Mira walked through the science fiction section, running her fingers along the spines of books, enjoying the texture. On Lemuria, all information was digital. The physical nature of books felt wonderfully real. Lyra entered the store, shaking droplets from her jacket. The familiar bell above the door chimed, mixing with the gentle background music. She headed toward the poetry section, which she knew was just past the science fiction shelves. Her mind was still on the last customer of the day, who had told her about something called love poems. Neither woman was paying attention to their surroundings when they turned the corner at the same moment. They collided softly, books tumbling from both their hands. "I'm so sorry," they began in unison, bending down to help each other, then froze as their eyes met. For a moment, neither could speak. They stared at each other, hardly believing what they were seeing. Here, in this quiet corner of a human bookstore, surrounded by stories of imagination and wonder, two exiles from a distant world found each other again. "Lyra?" Mira whispered, her voice shaking slightly. "Mira," Lyra breathed, reaching out hesitantly to touch her friend's hand, making sure she was real. They stood slowly, books forgotten on the floor. Around them, the store continued its peaceful evening routine. Soft music playing, customers browsing, rain tapping against the windows. But for Lyra and Mira, the world had suddenly shifted on its axis. "How?" Lyra started, then switched to their native language, keeping her voice low. "How are you here?" "They said we would be sent to different areas." "I've been here the whole time," Mira replied in the same language, her eyes bright with unshed tears, another human reaction they had both learned. "I teach mathematics at the community center on Pine Street." "I work at the coffee shop across the street," Lyra said, laughing softly at the incredible coincidence. "We've been so close all this time." They found a quiet corner with two comfortable chairs, their backs to the rain-streaked windows. For hours, they shared their experiences, comparing notes on everything they had learned about Earth and its people. They talked about the freedom they had found, the emotions they were learning to express, the connections they had made. "Do you remember how they told us this was punishment?" Mira asked, smiling. "They thought showing us the chaos of human society would make us appreciate Lemurian order. Instead, we're learning that chaos can be beautiful," Lyra finished, understanding perfectly what Mira meant. She felt something strange in her chest as she looked at her friend, a warm, fluttering sensation she had never experienced before. Mira felt it too, though neither of them had the words for it yet. They had read about it in their books, seen it in the way humans looked at each other, but hadn't understood until this moment what it meant to have your heart skip a beat at someone's smile. The bookstore was closing when they finally stepped back into the rain. Neither wanted to part again so soon after finding each other. "There's a small diner around the corner," Lyra suggested. "Humans go there to talk more over something called pancakes." "I'd like that," Mira said softly, and together they walked through the gentle rain, sharing an umbrella, both aware that something between them had changed in ways they were just beginning to understand. After their reunion at the bookstore, Lyra and Mira began spending all their free time together. They met for coffee before work, shared lunch breaks when possible, and spent evenings exploring the city. Something was changing between them, something neither of them had words for yet. One sunny afternoon, they sat in the park where Mira's pod had first landed. Children played nearby, their laughter carrying on the warm breeze. Lyra watched a young couple walking hand in hand, their fingers intertwined, sharing secret smiles. "I've been watching humans do that," Lyra said, nodding toward the couple. "Holding hands. It seems important to them." Mira followed her gaze. "My students told me about something called dating. It's how humans find their life partners. But it's different from arranged matches on Lemuria. They choose based on feelings, not social status or genetic compatibility." They sat quietly for a moment, both thinking about the cold, logical partnerships of their home world. Marriages there were carefully planned by the council, designed to maintain genetic diversity and social order. The concept of choosing a partner based on emotion would have been considered dangerous and irrational. "I feel different when I'm with you," Lyra said suddenly, her voice soft. "It's like the feeling I get when I see a beautiful sunset or hear music, but stronger. Is that normal?" Mira's heart beat faster. "I feel it too. Like everything is brighter when you're around. Even mathematics seems more beautiful when I think about explaining it to you." They looked at each other, startled by their honesty. On Lemuria, such open discussion of feelings would have been unthinkable, but Earth had changed them, taught them to recognize and express emotions they never knew they had. That evening, they went to their favorite diner. The waitress, Betty, who had come to know them as regular customers, noticed something different about them. "You two are glowing tonight," she said with a knowing smile as she brought their usual order of pancakes and coffee. "Glowing?" Lyra asked after Betty left. "Is that possible for humans?" Mira laughed. "Another thing they had learned on Earth. I think it's a figure of speech. I've noticed humans use a lot of words to describe feelings. They talk about hearts racing, butterflies in stomachs, glowing with happiness." "I have butterflies right now," Lyra admitted, then quickly added, "Not real ones, of course, but that feeling they describe, especially when you laugh." They fell silent, both processing this new understanding. Around them, the diner buzzed with its usual evening activity. Families sharing meals, friends catching up, couples sitting close together in booths. "I've been reading romance novels," Mira confessed suddenly, "trying to understand human relationships. They write about something called love. It's not like anything on Lemuria." Lyra's hand found Mira's across the table, an automatic gesture that surprised them both. But neither pulled away. "Tell me about it," Lyra whispered. "It's when two people choose each other, not because they have to, but because they want to. They make each other happy, support each other, care about each other's feelings. They want to be together all the time, share everything, good and bad." Their eyes met over their half-eaten pancakes. "Like us?" Lyra asked softly. "I think," Mira paused, gathering courage. "I think maybe exactly like us." The realization settled over them like warm sunlight. This was why Earth felt more like home than Lemuria ever had. This was why their exile had become a blessing. Here, they were free to feel this new, wonderful emotion, to love. "What do we do now?" Lyra asked, her thumb gently stroking Mira's hand. "I don't know," Mira admitted. "But I think that's part of it too, discovering it together." They stayed in the diner until closing time, talking softly, learning to name the feelings they had been experiencing. When they finally stepped outside into the cool night air, they held hands naturally, no longer questioning the gesture. Above them, stars twinkled, the same stars visible from Lemuria, but somehow more beautiful now that they had someone special to share them with. The message came on a quiet Sunday morning. Lyra and Mira were sharing breakfast in Lyra's small apartment, a routine they had fallen into over the past few weeks. Their universal translator suddenly activated with a familiar chime. one they hadn't heard since arriving on Earth. "Attention, exiles." The cold, formal voice of head counselor Vale filled their minds. "Your period of punishment has yielded unexpected results. Our monitoring systems show significant changes in your thought patterns and emotional responses." Lyra reached for Mira's hand instinctively. They had known this might happen someday, but had hoped for more time. "The Council has reviewed your cases," Vale continued. "We are prepared to end your exile under one condition. You must renounce these new emotional attachments and return to your proper places in society. Your genetic profiles are too valuable to waste on a primitive world." The message continued with instructions for their return, but neither woman was listening anymore. They looked at each other, their breakfast forgotten. "They want us back," Mira whispered, her voice trembling. "They're offering to restore our status." "Our status," Lyra repeated quietly. "Our comfortable, empty lives. Our logical, loveless futures." Outside, rain began to fall, the gentle Seattle rain they had grown to love. On the street below, people hurried past with colorful umbrellas, ducking into coffee shops and bookstores. This world that had seemed so strange at first now felt more like home than Lemuria ever had. "We would have to give up everything," Mira said, looking around the apartment. Small signs of their shared life were everywhere. Books they had read together, pictures they had taken, silly souvenirs from their explorations of the city. Go back to being proper Lumerians. No emotions, no choices, no love. Lyra finished. The word no longer felt foreign on her tongue. They had learned its meaning, its power, its beauty. They spent the day in quiet discussion, walking through their favorite places in the city. The coffee shop where Lyra worked was closed, but they stood outside it, remembering all the times Mira had visited during Lyra's shifts, pretending to read while secretly watching her make coffee art. They passed the community center where Mira taught. Through the windows, they could see her students' math projects displayed on the walls. Each one represented a moment of discovery, of understanding. The joy of learning that Lumerian education had never allowed. "Remember what they told us about Earth?" Mira asked as they walked through the park. "They said it was primitive because humans let emotions guide them." "But they were wrong," Lyra said. "Emotions don't make humans weak. They make them strong. They build connections, create art, solve problems in ways we never could because they care about the outcome." The sun was setting when they reached the bookstore where they had reunited. It was still open, warm light spilling onto the wet sidewalk. Through the window, they could see people browsing, reading, sharing stories with each other. "The council thinks they're offering us a reward," Mira said softly. "A chance to return to our old lives." "But it's really another punishment," Lyra finished. "Now that we know what it means to feel, to love. Going back would be worse than any exile." Their translators chimed again, a reminder that the council expected an answer. They had 1 hour to decide. "I can't go back," Mira said suddenly, turning to face Lyra. "Not now. Not after knowing what it's like to make my own choices, to teach children who want to learn. She paused, gathering courage. "To love you." Lyra pulled her close, not caring who saw them. Another thing they had learned on Earth. Love was nothing to hide. "Then we don't go back. We stay here, where we can be ourselves, where we can be together." "The council won't understand," Mira whispered against Lyra's shoulder. "They don't need to," Lyra replied. "That's the whole point of love, isn't it? It doesn't need to make logical sense. It just needs to be real." Above them, the clouds parted slightly, revealing a few early stars. Somewhere up there was Lemuria, with all its perfect order and empty precision. But here on Earth, in the mess and chaos and beauty of human emotion, they had found something far more precious, each other. The morning after they rejected the council's offer, Lyra and Mira woke to find their universal translators had gone silent. Their last connection to Lemuria was dead, but neither felt the loss they might have expected. Instead, they felt lighter, as if invisible chains had finally fallen away. They had spent the night composing their reply to the council. It wasn't a request for forgiveness or a rejection of their heritage. Instead, they had sent a simple message: "We choose love." After that, they switched off their translators and left them on Lyra's kitchen table, two small reminders of the world they were leaving behind. Life continued, but everything felt different now. Colors seemed brighter, sounds clearer, emotions deeper. At the coffee shop, Lyra created her most beautiful latte art yet, two hearts intertwined in the foam. Rose noticed the change in her employee, the way Lyra hummed while she worked, the extra warmth in her smile. "Love looks good on you," Rose said, making Lyra blush. Another human reaction she had come to embrace. At the community center, Mira's students noticed her joy too. She taught mathematics with new passion, helping them see the beauty in numbers and patterns. When a student finally understood a difficult concept, their excitement felt like a small celebration of discovery. The kind of learning that Lumeria had forgotten was possible. One evening, as they walked home from dinner, they passed a street musician playing guitar. The melody was sweet and simple, and without thinking, they began to dance right there on the sidewalk. Other couples joined them, and soon the street corner became an impromptu celebration of life and love. "Do you think they're watching us?" Mira asked later, as they sat on the roof of their apartment building, looking at the stars. "The council." "Probably," Lyra replied, wrapping a blanket around them both. "But they'll never understand what they're seeing. They've forgotten how to see beauty in unexpected things." They had moved in together, combining their small collections of Earth treasures, books, photos, silly souvenirs, and all the little things that made this planet home. Their apartment became a testament to their new life. Mira's mathematical diagrams hung next to Lyra's coffee-stained poetry books, their different interests blending into a perfect harmony. Weeks passed, then months. Spring turned to summer, and they discovered the joy of warm days in the park, ice cream melting faster than they could eat it, and outdoor movies under the stars. They learned to swim in the public pool, tried every flavor of ice cream they could find, and gathered a small group of close friends who accepted them without question. 1 year after their exile began, they celebrated with a small party at their favorite diner. Betty decorated their usual booth with balloons, and their friends from work and the community center joined them. No one there knew they were celebrating more than just an anniversary. They were celebrating their freedom to love, to choose, to be themselves. "I've been thinking," Lyra said that night, as they walked home through their beloved city. "Maybe we weren't exiled to Earth." "What do you mean?" Mira asked, squeezing her hand. "Maybe we were always meant to find our way here, to find each other, to learn what love really means." They stopped at the corner where they had first reunited, outside the bookstore that had become such an important part of their story. The shop was closed for the night, but the windows still glowed softly, shelves of books visible inside, hundreds of stories about love and discovery waiting to be read. "The council thought they were punishing us," Mira said, understanding. "But they actually set us free. Free to love, free to learn, free to live. Free to be human," Lyra suggested with a smile. "Free to be ourselves," Mira corrected gently. "Whatever that means." They kissed under the street light, no longer aliens pretending to be human, but simply two beings who had found love in the most unexpected place. Above them, Seattle's perpetual clouds parted just enough to show a single star, perhaps Lumeria, watching its exiled daughters find a happiness it had never known was possible. As they walked home hand in hand, they passed other couples, other people in love, other stories unfolding in the night. They were just one small part of Earth's beautiful chaos now, and that was exactly where they wanted to be.